Analytics Rebel Alliance is counting on you. Like, subscribe, leave a comment down below, turn on that alarm bell so you don't miss any future edition. Right. Hey, everybody. Thank you guys for tuning in. This is kind of a live stream that came out of some work that we were doing this week in a back and forth in our Saturday morning live crew. Big shout out to everyone on SML. We had a great session this morning talking with Phil Seamark and having the whole crew together talking about crazy things you can do inside of Power BI. And frankly, that it's just a wonderful community. The more we can get together, the more we can talk and work together, I think helps us improve the way we operate. So to that end, I have created a gilded server so we can keep that information going back and forth. So please, I posted the link inside the chat. Hop on, get connected. Let's keep talking about this stuff because we all face different challenges every single day. And one of the best ways to overcome issues and overcome roadblocks is to connect with people who are doing this stuff and, just asking for a little help out. And frankly, we all get stuck in the weeds and we all get held up, and that's what can really kind of throw things off. So having that place where you can go and ask for help is super important, and just keeping that creative juices going and keeping things going. But the reason y'all are here, the reason we're talking today is something that comes up all the time. It's how do I ensure that the Power BI project I'm working on is going to meet the needs of my end users. It's going to deliver the value that we want for our business. And that's what we've been kind of talking about in this community, and like how can we create a wireframe around the work we do in Power BI to ensure that we're delivering on results. So I'm going to be doing quite a bit of talking, but I got some visuals and stuff that we're going to head on over to. So let's head over to that. Okay, so this is the Gilded Discord, or the Gilded server that's out there for KratosBI.com. Come join us. We're helping people out. We talked about this. All my material and content is available on KratosBI.com, so it's free. I don't have any, there's no paywalls or anything like that. I don't have anything like that. Out on here on my Data God model page, I've got a number of different resources here because I think there's lots of challenges that we commonly are dealing with as we start to get more advanced into the solutions or into the questions that we're working with. And these resources are designed to target and provide you with some solutions for that, frankly, the things that I use to solve all these different kind of problems and challenges. So I'm going to be doing some videos on all of this stuff, but all of the materials are now out and available on the website. Please go out and check it out. It is, frankly, if you want to be a masterclass business intelligence developer, there's a lot of stuff that can really help you there. I'll be showing you how to do it in a little bit. But today we're going to be focusing in on the Data God wireframe. Now, this is because we have to remember in business intelligence, we are talking about how do we deliver business for our end users and for people who are working with data. And so some of the people who are going to be doing this stuff are going to be hardcore BI developers. And for you on the live stream, that's probably you. But for those of you who are tuning in later because you're just hey, I got this BI project that I need to take on. How do I start to deliver on this stuff? How do I get these things in place and start to deliver? How do I string out and manage a project? Well, this is for you. So let's head into the wireframe. Okay. So I started with PowerPoint, right? So this is just a PowerPoint file, right? The deck you can download, it's out there. There's nothing proprietary here, right? So if you have Office, which you do because you work with Power BI, right? You can download and you can use this stuff, okay? And a big shout out to Sue and Anthony for all of your help in working with this stuff. This could be really helpful in getting you through this. Hopefully, as I walk through this, we can run through and understand what you do with this, how you can leverage this as a tool inside your organization. All right. Now, first thing, because I know there's many of you who will watch like up to here, will see the first tips, and then you'll just go download it and you'll go play. And that's fine. I do the same thing all the time too. Apologies. But big thing, when we're talking about wireframing, the focus isn't on our data, right? I mean, focus will be a little bit on our data, but we're going to be focusing on the end users, okay? We need to make sure that our end users are at the front of our mind, at the front of every conversation, what we're thinking about here, right? We want to make sure that we understand when we're creating measures, when we're creating a report page, what is it what are the actions that we're going to be asking our end users to take? Are they going to be going out and engaging with the customer, engaging with the employee? Is this going to be something to do with defects, right? We want to make sure that we understand what it is we're going to be asking of people before we go on to that next step, right? And that's what's going to lead us into those KPIs, right? The measures and KPIs that we're going to be using should be wrapped around that action, right? What are the things you need to know that lead into an action, right? That will lead you up into, if we're talking sales, like what are the things that happen before the sale, right? Have you had a phone call with them? Have you had a meeting? Have you sent emails? What marketing materials have customers received, right? Have they reached out and engaged back with you? What are those precursors to that point of action that we're talking about? And then also, what are the trailing things that have occurred around that, right? So maybe you're talking customer service and you need to make sure that you're like, okay, hey, yeah, the customer bought something a month ago or 3 months ago or 6 months ago or a year ago. But what has happened since then? Has their car been in for service 6 or 7 times, right? Like, what is the information that you need to know inside that experience? Remember, that user who's looking at the report, what are they going to need to have, right? And then as you look through a report, and even if it's just on a page, think about the flow of that page, right? Start off with those high-level measures, go into those different action tips, and then think about what are the actions that you're going to be asking an end user to go through, right? These things are going to be really important as we start to lay out and build the flow of our wireframe, right? Within a report, though, you also want to make sure that you're using the appropriate amount of white space so you're not overwhelming your users with information. There's only so much we can take in any one visual. It can be really hard if a page is just filled with hundreds of charts, hundreds of pop-ups to know where to go, what to do, right? We need to make sure that we are driving these things in for solution, right? And then as you go and as you start to lay out your report, think about the rule of thirds. And the rule of thirds comes from photography. At least that's where I learned it from. And it talks about how you want to have in a page or in a photo, you want to have your photo divided up into thirds, right? And use those guidelines as to where you have your biggest markers and where the biggest key elements are for engaging with users, okay? That's going to tell you where you should be putting those key metrics, those key engagement points inside of your experience, right? So that you know that, okay, hey, I'm only operating within the center third, or I've got points that go along that, right? So understanding that, using that is vitally important as you build out your wireframe. So you think about that user experience, right? The next thing you want to do is make sure that you have you keep your users in the analytics, right? As much as possible, you want to keep them in a space and not sending them off into a whole bunch of other spaces. You want to make sure that they're inside that experience, or if you're actually asking them to take an action, that it takes them directly to where there's an action, right? So a great example is a link into Dynamics, right? And take them right into that customer page inside of Dynamics, right? Create a dynamic measure in DAX that links them through into that stuff, and then make sure that they understand what those next steps are and what they're going to do with that. And then make sure that as the users are in there, those KPIs and those metrics, provide enough context for them so that they know when the information, the data you have may be saying do this, and maybe it's wrong, right? Maybe there's not enough information there to say yes, definitively do this, or no, don't go ahead and do this, okay? As you notice, none of this was focused in on data, okay? So we want to make sure that as we do this, we lay this stuff out. We want to be thinking about accessing and using this inside of Power BI and the data that we're going to need on this stuff, but make sure that we start with the focus on that end user, right? And so it's not going to start on the data side, okay? Now, again, when we walk through and building out the wireframe, and we're going to build out the wireframe in just a minute, okay? Again, we're going to start with the user. We're going to make sure we understand who that user is, right? So are we talking about a salesperson? Are we talking about someone who's in upper management and leadership? Are we talking about a customer sales person who's going to be engaging and talking to a customer on the phone, and they don't have a lot of time to like read and analyze because they're going to be working on the phone. Right, we want to make sure that we really understand who that user is before we move on to okay, what is the report going to look like for that user? All right, dig into and spend time at that point in time. Now that you know the users, laying out the report, going through the wireframe of what that report needs to look like, right? And as you lay that out and you talk through what are the key elements that you're going to have, what are the KPIs that you're going to be using in those places, this is the information that's going to go and inform you as to what works, what data is necessary inside of your model, all right? And then when you actually do the work, and where did my arrows go? My arrows disappeared. You actually work backwards. So you start with users on the design and wireframe. We'll start on that front, and we'll go through with users, report, and data. But when you start actually building this project and laying out the work, you start with the data first, right? So you understand what the layout's going to be like. Your analytics engineers or your people who are doing the work, they can go in and start to build out a model that's going to provide the functionality that you're going to need for that for that given report. Okay, so you want to make sure that you kind of run through one, in the design phase, and then build the opposite. All right. Now, when we talk about the report requirements, again, we're talking about who is that audience that's key from you. Make sure that you not only do you define it, but you document it so that as the other people who are working on this, and maybe you're in a small place, it's just one guy, and okay, it's or girl, whatever, right? Like it's really easy for them to keep track of who it is, but often you might be finding yourself working with many different people here. It's really important to keep that key stakeholder or key stakeholders in mind as we build out that experience, right? Then we want to make sure we understand how is this going to be shared internally. Is this something you're just passing around a PBX file? Is this something that is published in the service and you're going to have in an app? Is mobile necessary? Right? Is this something that your people are going to be using as you go out on the road and you're going to be pulling up your cell phone on a regular basis? Oh, wow, that green screen blocked that up. That's funny. Right? Make sure that you understand what consumption experiences are going to be necessary for this report, at least at design time. Right? And then think about who's your design audience here, right? Is this just for trading off between a few people? Is this a team, department? Is this for a whole enterprise? Is this for customers, right? The scope and your audience should really start to dictate and drive how much time and energy you put into a lot of these different steps, right? There's going to be a different amount of work that you put into work that's going to go for a small team or a handful of people inside your organization, unless they're the CEO or CFO, right? And then maybe an infinite amount of time and energy is going to be important to do that, right? Same thing is true if you're going to be doing something that's going to be public facing, right? So if it's going to be public facing, are you sharing this through an embedded app? If you're sharing it through an embedded app, then you have to take other considerations into play and whatnot, but make sure you've run through each of these things as you lay out who it is your audience for, right? Again, these are some common questions that you have around purpose, right? Making sure that you've laid these things out. Make sure that you start to storyboard out all of the items, and the storyboarding is what is really important inside of the wireframes, and we're going to actually get into that in just 1 second. And then always keeping that focus in on what your action is and how you work with that. That's what's going to be some of the key stakes that we're talking about here. Okay. Next thing, make sure that you have understood and you've defined what are your business rules that are required here, right? So if you're looking for CAGRs, if you're looking for year over year run rates, if you're looking for different percentages or different operations that are inside your business, these are things that are going to be really important for you to lay out and document so that not just the developers who are using the information or building out that data understand it, but the people who come along behind it know what it is and how these calculations go. And then also, do you have exceptions? Do you have exemptions? Do you handle one area or one group differently than another? Those are all things that are very real in a business world, right? Like if you have clients or products or customers that have been with you for 10, 20 years, you might expect a different rate of growth than you do on other groups, right? And how you apply that, how this works and applies inside the data inside your space is all really important to understand, right? Now, we are going to just quick go into, that's out of order. All right. Now, this is where we start to talk data story. It's all inside of the page navigation. It's laying out and wireframing what are the pages that you're going to need in order to tell these stories, okay? Is it all going to be captured inside of one page? I mean, that's ideal, right? You don't want to be sending people all over the place. But if one page becomes overly busy, overly crowded, and it's too much for people to consume, what other pages are you going to need? And this is where we start to lay out and want to understand what that navigation and flow is going to look like, right? And then also decide, how is that navigation going to occur, right? As well as any tooltips that you'd pop up, potentially any different app integrations, those types of things, right? To start that, we have a number of page elements that I use when it comes to wireframing a Power BI report that really kind of helps me drill these things out. Oh, my graphics are missing. And we're going to jump in, and I'm actually going to run through, and I'm going to set this up, and I'm going to show you how I would go through and do this myself. So let me just head over here. All right, so this is the file, right? So we're not faking anything at this point in time, right? Now, again, we keep these things very simple, right? I am a big fan of just inserting a new blank slide and then grabbing the elements that are going to be most important to me, right? So I'm just going to grab all these guys, drop them in there, and then I'm going to be thinking through, get rid of these because I don't need them. I know what these are, right? Oh, come on. I'm going to get rid of these, and I'm going to start to work with these on my join so I can lay it out. Now, please note, the only colors I'm going to use inside my wireframe are going to be little directional things. I don't want I don't want to be laying out data. I don't want to be laying out, different colors or how I'm going to be building this. I want this to be very basic to speak to the process and the flow that people are working through and not digging into how they're going to work and operate in something. So I'll give you an example that we have that, okay, we start with a home page, right? This is a very common experience where people go in, they see the high level KPIs, they see the high level metrics, that type of a thing. We might even stick a tip that goes on it, right? To help people understand what's going inside that home page, right? So home has a link to a tip page. I'll always have a help and an info page that will go into my reports. So I'm going to use those as well, right? So I've got my help and my info. Those are always going to be linking in. And I'm going to do some common things inside my help and my info, right? So my info is going to be providing me details on the data, specific business measures, that type of a thing. Anything, when was the data last refreshed? And I'm not talking about when was it last refreshed in the service. I'm talking about when was the data last refreshed from the sources that I'm pulling from, right? I may have refreshed this morning, but if that data was as of end of month in January, I want to make sure that I'm communicating out that it's through January 31st, right? And here's where I start to go into additional pages, right? So I've got my home page here, and that's we'll go in and we'll lay some of that stuff out. But I know I'm going to have some different ones. And while I'm going to use some like common markers here, I am going to also I'm going to name these pages so that I'm very specific, right? So I'm working on a project right now about how we provide oversight in all of our automation and processing in our new Synapse environment, right? So we've got a homepage that's filled with all sorts of high-level KPIs when it comes to when things were last loaded, performance measures, validation, right? And so I've got pages that are going to talk about detailed loads. Actually, these are just going to be loads, and loads has actually turned out to be like there's lots of information on that. So loads is still going to be a summary, right? I mean, we'll have some indicators like some big, like ups or downs. I think Alex Powers has joked about having just one big KPI thing that's a smiley face or a thumbs up or thumbs down, or but so you want to have that on your homepage, but you want to go into more details on your summary. But then on our our drill-in page that we'll go from there, we'll actually go to load details, right? Right. Also from my main page, I'm going to have some information here on my validations. Right, so this is the high level. What's the data quality that's going into my system? I want to make sure that that's set up right, that looks good. I'm going to make sure that I have a validation details that go on along with that. Now, when I think about the key stakeholders here, and I think I forgot that as I was starting to lay this out. My key stakeholders in this example are engineers or consumers of data who are working on my broad Synapse platform, right? So I've got, a few hundred engineers who are working and operating in this space. They want to know what's the status of what's going on with their loads, what's happening there. In addition, I also have some business users that will want to understand what's going on with data and processing so that they know, like, okay, hey, financials reports or what are going on, right? And so I have two kind of users and visitors here. So I'm going to want to make sure that I have enough resources and assets for them so that both parties are able to get the information they need. And so that's going to really help me when it comes to spitting these out. But that's also going to imply to me that I also need to include some additional tip pages, right? So I'm going to include some more tip pages that are going to navigate from my validations pages, but I'm also going to do it on my details pages because, frankly, people want more information on each of these. We've kind of run through some of the exercises. I kind of know that's going to be a thing. Oops, Control Z, copy, paste. So I know I'm going to need some tip pages that will go along for each one of these. Now, when I talk about what my action is on my validations, as well as on my loads, it's to do something, right? It's not just, hey, is everything fine, right? When everything is fine and things are thumbs up, almost no one ever leaves the homepage, right? I mean, some people might go in further from the homepage down, but often it's to figure out there's an issue, right? So I want to be mindful as I build out my load or my validations that the information that I have there allows the people who are consuming it to know what the next steps are, right? So know that if I've uncovered a load issue, like maybe something loaded out of order or whatever it is, right? What were the jobs that ran? What were the triggers? What are the log files that they can go to look for more information, right? Or if I'm starting to see something and I question something inside my data, I can go into my data validation pieces and I can start to see like, hey, what's going on? Did someone send in a blank file, right? That wasn't caught by our data, or like, there was just some oddity in that file that got brought in and sourced. Did that cause some issues, right? That's going to be all of the things that we have inside my validations pages that are going on here. So each one of these, I want to make sure that I've got links that take not just my business users to where the issue is, but my engineers directly into either my Databricks runbooks or right into my Azure DevOps, where we can go look for issues, or even into dynamic linking into our Control M scheduling or our ticketing system, so that they can know, like, oh, hey, this is an issue. A ticket was automatically generated. Go to this link, or go here and search for, because we have a kind of standard name for our tickets. It takes you right into that that different place for that action, right? So that's where I want to make sure that I have my different apps here, and I'm gonna just put a block around my app. I don't know why this thing used to have that, but okay, we'll call this app. So in this case, the app here is, well, like I said, it'd be Control M. It would be my Databricks runbooks, and it would be my ticketing system. So Control M, Databricks. Ooh, that didn't look right. Right, and tickets. Right, all of these things will link right through, and because these are going to external links, I'm gonna outside of my system, I'm going to drag them in here. This is external. Control M is external as well. But my Databricks runbooks are going to be internal, and I'll run actually from my Databricks runbooks. They'll go from both these places. So I want to make sure that I've got those links from both my load detail space all the way into my validation space. In both of these situations, I want to make sure that it's there. The third place I have that we're working on right now is on performance. Well, we'll just call it perf because it doesn't fit. In that situation, we have some actual similar content things that are going on. So performance details, like why would something be taking longer than normal? Those types of questions are very common, right? But as you can see, I continue to keep that focus in on what is it that people are doing with the data. What are those next steps? What are the actions that people are going to take? And because I've taken the time to wireframe this out, I know all the different places where I'm going to need to make sure I've got dynamic measures in place that allow me to link back into the various places, right? So I've got dynamic links needed for Control M, Databricks tickets. In this case, I actually have a Power App also for my AAS / Gen 2 models. So these Power Apps allow us, if there's any issues in our validations or any issues in loads for reruns. So I'm going to take this as an outside thing so we can kind of set that up. So we're always looking for ways that we can make these things easier for people to work with and operate. And if it's something we can't automate, we want to make sure that it's something easy for people to go in and use themselves. So they can go right in, they can build all these things out, and refreshing a table in a model or a partition in a model is now just something that, we pull up my smartphone, pull up my model, hit refresh, and everything's good to go, right? It does like a precursor check to is there source data, right? Is there not? Okay, go ahead, refresh it, right? But I've now created an outline with all of the different pieces that I'm going to need inside of my report, right? So this gives me some kind of understanding when it comes to as I start to lay out my work and I start to think about my PI plan, how long is it going to take for us to execute on this, right? So we've got, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 pages that we're going to be talking about. The data, and from here we'll start to lay out what are all the elements that are going to be on each of these pages. We're not going to do that in the live stream, that's too much, but want to show you conceptually how you run through something along these lines in order to build out not just the wireframe of what it is you need to do, but the effort it's going to take to get there, right? So the next thing we want to do is, okay, we've laid this out. Let's start to talk about how do we lay out one of these pages, and let's run through how we're going to lay out. Actually, we'll start with our home page. It'll be a little bit easier for us as we start to go into it. And that's where we have, well, we'll actually flip back to the presentation now. That's where we start to go into visual elements, okay? Now, some just basic information that we want to be aware of as we're looking at this at laying out a page. We want to make sure that we understand, like, what are the visuals we're looking to bring forward? What slicers, what other concepts, what other things do we want to make sure people have the ability to do on any given page, right? So remember, if you put too much on a singular page, it can become really overwhelming. So it becomes this balance that you have to strike between the visuals that you have and that actual usage pattern, right? And then when we talk about that, especially like if we think about like the home page, what are my thumbs up that we're going to be talking about that I can clearly bring through so we can talk, understand like, hey, everything is good, or maybe we have some issues, right? This is where we start to get into leading and trailing indicators, right? Like, so if I'm talking about my environment and all of my loads across my Synapse space, I want to know what are my leading indicators, right? Like I need to know when my data's done. I care about like done, but done, am I 5% of the way through my loads? Am I 95% of my way through my loads? Where do I stand in this? And what's the like average run time for any given process, right? As well, and some trailing things would want to be out there as well, right? Like a good trailing indicator was when was the last time my analysis services read models cache was synced, right? So, okay, things are loading. If we're just loading into the data process or the data write analysis services, and I haven't done the sync on it yet, well, okay, it doesn't matter, right? Like the data has gotten to the read, but none of the users are hitting it, right? So this is where we start to capture and bring forward some of those metrics inside of our reports, okay? Now, for the visual elements here, I kind of did, I kind of do broad stroke layouts. These are the items I use to just kind of start to lay these things out. I am a big fan of using the hero visual, but again, we just kind of start with first laying out what the design is going to look like, and then we go through and we start to go in and use the actual visuals that we have when it comes to working inside the space. Now, I've kind of put together some kind of like cheap little like sketches of these visuals for you so that you can use them, again, with an eye on not laying out and actually building, but like what is it that we're going to be seeing and what is that actual activity that's going to be out there, right? These are all the like standard Power BI visuals out there. You can like throw a mock-up in. I mean, again, it's just Excel, right? PowerPoint. Now, to do this, I have a few palettes that I go back and forth on using. I will often use this palette, especially the rule of thirds palette. I'll use these markers to kind of line things up as I'm laying out a palette, and then I delete it out, right? It's nothing, that needs to be in there. Occasionally, I'll use quadrants because some people seem to really like a quadrant layout. Getting in and having that clean look, they like. Again, rule of thirds, that really dominates, and it's something that I am a big fan of supporting. And then if I'm talking about something that has both a front end consumption pattern where it's going to be some people on a desktop, but it's also going to be someone on a mobile app, I want to make sure that I take the time to think through and design for that mobile experience, right? Like, I don't want to just have that front end developer like, hey, I just care about the desktop guy. If my consumer's only going to be on mobile, well, my desktop has very little, value to it, right? So I have these kind of layouts here for you. as well as kind of a sketch pad again here, in case you want to lay out and start to really have that conversation around what are the filters on a given pane. This can be really helpful, especially when wireframing and you have business users and talking through what filters need to be on a pane versus what filters could be off of the pane and out of a given palette. Okay, so again, let's hop over into PowerPoint and let's kind of run through how we would set this stuff up. So again, I go over to my palettes. I've got my different palettes here, and I'm going to do a layout. And for the purposes of this demonstration, we're going to duplicate this guy, and we'll create this one as a sample. So we're talking about my home page, wanting to know what the status is of different levels and different loads. So I have a number of visuals that I'm going to first start to lay out. So I know I'm pretty much going to use all of these guys. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to go down to where I'm building that out. I'm going to lay that out. Now, I know that I'm going to like stick a bunch of these guys off to the side. What the heck are my... Weird. Some of my images aren't staying. Well, I'll just make this simple. So inside of my homepage, you know, I'm gonna basically design to have a load. I do know that I have I've got 3 layers of my data lake loading. So I'm going to include those. All right, I've got my 3 layers of my data lake, my Synapse DW load, and then I've got my my analytics model in place. Right now, we do have a standard where we use as pretty much a constant. We use the smart narratives for our users so they can understand what's going on. It's a great place to put some kind of like metrics in there. We've actually had really good luck in that. So we're always going to keep a smart narrative item on our page. We are going to include a menu button. Now, we don't actually need a toggle in this guy. I know we'll have our logo here. And we're probably going to do some kind of like navigations inside of this experience. And the reason I'm going to keep these as navigations is, well, I want the flexibility to stay within a report and thus a model, or bounce around to different reports, because I have some kind of different concept that, or I have some different sources that I know that I'm going to be mucking around with my models. I do know that this is going to be a group, right? So I'm going to define it as such, right? And my navigation, again, because I've already done my layout, I know I've got 3 detail pages that I'm going to be going into, right? So I can define that there. I do know that I also have a hero visual that I'd like to use that shows me graphically, not just the KPIs that run along this space, but also show me graphically when I can come in where we're at on the flow and the status of that. And then I know that there's a need for some more detailed visuals that will go on there. So my text box doesn't work really great there, so I'll kind of bring this in, and I don't know, maybe build this in and lay this out. All right, help and information that always pops up on the side by our menu. Actually, in this case, I don't need a menu, so that's great. So we'll just use this. Got help and information. This seems to work out great. Again, really quick. I'm going to have a few things that I'm going to put on the side here so that we can have more detailed things. For example, we have source runs. We have specific model areas that people are looking out for, right? So those are things that I'd want to make sure that we include here. So I'm just going to, because we can cheat, all right? So the filter is model. And that's really goes into the source, right? So, and in this case, I want my model to be, as I drill in on my reports, right? So on every page inside of here, I'll go model. I also have source. And I actually have, I know I have another thing where it is area of the organization, right? So HR, sales, marketing, that type of thing. Everyone has different focuses. We know what their focuses are. This allows me to go in and lay this out. Now I've got my nice little dashboard here where I can start to lay out what I want to have on here. Again, I have a hero visual. Some of these things that I've got built in here, we'll quick pull these out. So this one's going to be my card. It's going to be on my tops, right? So I kind of know this guy, right? So shrink this guy up. Shrink my text accordingly. I should probably make that more dynamic, huh? I got 5 of those. 2, 4, 5. Here's also where I would go in once I've done this. Like, I know we've talked about it, but here's where I would put on there what are the key KPIs, what are the measures that we're going to be tracking at each of these points, right? So we can define and make sure that we understand, my landing layer, what are the items that I'm going to be measuring? At my curated layer, same thing. At my process layer, what's going to be there? At my analytics or synapse layer, what's the measure there? And then at my models layer, what's going to be there, right? My hero visual, actually that's that flow chart. It's a custom visual, so I don't really have one of those, but I'm going to use this to as kind of like a cheap takeoff on it. So I'm going to kind of do that. I'm going to spin it and keep it simple, right? Again, we don't want to necessarily have the visuals here. We're all just talking about the what it is that we're going to be breaking out. This visual, though, leads me to the questions around what are the KPIs that I'm going to be measuring? How am I going to make sure that I've got the data in the right shape in order to support this visual? And this guy, I know it's just going to be a matrix, so I'm just going to go grab my matrix visual. And I'm going to stick it down here because apparently you can't do a Power BI report without a matrix visual on it or a table. So here, I've now created a wireframe. At the end of this, I would have identified what all of my KPIs are, what are all the other elements, what are the interaction items that I need to have, and I'd understand what were the data needs that I'd need to have for the work that I was about to do. Now, I would just take this exercise, and I'd recreate it for each of these items that I have out that I've identified here. So I would run through this again for one, however many tables this are, however many tooltips we need to have. I would put that in here. Oh yeah, I forgot. We want to make sure that there's a tooltip on this guy. And this guy has a tooltip. This is where I want my tooltip to be, and then we build that out. Again, because I did my wireframe, and we talked through it at that high level, right? Because I knew this, I realized, oh crap, I didn't even document oh no, I had it right there, done. Because I laid it out, we had that conversation, I was able to go in and clearly build that out, okay? So I've laid this out, I've got this done, I've run through and I've built out all of the pages of my navigation, what it's going to look like at high level, and again, we want to be focusing on the user as we're doing all this stuff. We want to talk through what are the actions they're going to take if they see this, right? Why would they be looking at this when they come in and look at this board, right? Again, it's, we want to make sure we have that conversation. We think through that. Now, ideally, this is something you do in conjunction with users. If not, okay, you have, in this situation, I had to do a lot of this in my head myself, put myself in their positions. But you start with this and you start to break that down, okay? Once you've defined this, that's when you could start to go in and have that conversation on data sources. And this is where we're supposed to break into that data section here. So we'll go back to my presentation and head on to the next one. Okay. Now, once you've laid that out, it becomes much easier to go through and define what are your data sources for all this information, right? Like in my case, I have a lot of information that we store in a database that monitors and logs and tracks everything that goes on across our data landscape, right? So everything that starts, everything that stops, every error, every process, right, writes logs into a database that we then run analytics off of, and we have automation that drives through that. But we also use things like log analytics, and we use things like data feeds out of our Control M, or our automation space, or our ticketing area. We go through and we build out all of those things, and we define them inside of right now, right? Like, we've now understood all of the places we're going to have to go to get that information, right? And we're going to know how good it is, right? Like, I guarantee you our quality team has not trolled through the log analytics files that come out of my analysis services to see if there's any quality issues inside there. I presume there isn't, right? Like, I don't have any reason to doubt it, but we haven't done any tests on it. So, there's always a trust but verify type thing, right? Right. And that leads us to that next step. When it comes to building out these things, what are the data validation checks that you should have inside of your space, right? That's a big key, especially as we talk about working in a data lake and working with people. How do you manage what's going through? And I always talk about inline and offline checks on data quality, right? Like, hey, when data's flowing through, do your record counts and valid amounts like match the source, right? Did you get the right number of records? Did you have some sort of checksum that you could make sure that everything came through the way it was supposed to, right? Like, understanding that before it moves on and loads and gets presented out to people is important. But, like, we have thousands upon thousands of tables that are moving around, all through automation and whatnot. You can't slow everything down to do those macro level or those huge validations in places. So that's where those offline checks come in, right? So, like, okay, hey, this is running through, but let's while it's going through, let's do some bigger checks, right? Like, do we have all of our customers? Do we lose any, right? Like, do we have all our salespeople, offices, all of that stuff? Making sure that they're there and in place. That's something that's really important, so that if we ever detect something like that, we do a failback or we do a rollback to a previous state of the data, right? And when you're talking about terabytes of data, it's really important to have a strategy there, because that's not as easy as rolling back a few lines of code, right? Like, rolling back terabytes is a big deal, right? So making sure that you have that all automated and processed, so that you have a means of managing that, is important. So defining that at this point of what are the quality checks your business users are going to have here, right? Like, hey, if you're reporting in on sales, what are the sales metrics that your accountants or your finance staff is going to look at to first, like, do that baseline, thumb in the wind test to make sure that everything is coming through right? Making sure that that's in place, right? Document those items. Then how are you going to connect into those data sources, right? We've now defined them all, right? Okay, does that have to be like an Excel spreadsheet that someone manually downloads? Is this something that can be out in SharePoint? Is this in the data warehouse? Is it in the lake? Can you use service principals? Is this something that Tom from accounting has to, like, download to a thumb drive and walk over to you because Tom doesn't know how email works, right? I mean, these are all things that we need to define and understand. Now, hopefully Tom from accounting doesn't have to, like, actually do that anymore. Like, that's a thing we don't do anymore, I hope. But I think I read something about in South Africa, it's easier to send a thumb drive on a pigeon than it is to, like, transfer files via internet. That seems crazy, right? So, yeah, like, making sure that you get that stuff out there is and how you're connecting to it and how you're working with it, it's important. And then what is the filters? What is the limits that you need on the data size, right? Like, frankly, when we're talking about what's going on and what's processing, when we talk about performance and optimizations, or what's going on today in our loads and whatnot in the conversation we were just talking about, like, on our loads and activity, like, on that front end dashboard that people have, like, you need like 72 hours of information, right? That's trillions of records or something like that, but you only need those 72 hours of information. But when you look at performance, especially performance over time, you might want to have like a 3-year or a 3-month trailing indicator on processes, so that you can dynamically start to alert yourself when processes are starting to take more time, right? When there are sudden issues inside of your data loads, right? Like, if you're always getting 5 gigs of data from sales every single day, and then you get a petabyte of data, like what just happened upstream where you've got a petabyte of data, right? Like you may suddenly really need to make a change and a difference in how you're working with your data, right? You need to have those alerts there, right? So understanding how you filter, managing that stuff, that's really important here, right? And as well as, I kind of mentioned this before, but understanding those data formulas, right? Like we define them and say, okay, CAGR. Well, okay. If you're in finance, you know what CAGR is. I'm in IT and I'm in analytics and I can barely pronounce CAGR, right? And the people you have working on this stuff, if you're in IT or you're doing this work, you might not know what the heck a CAGR is, right? It's at this wireframing time where it's important to have that conversation, lay out what is a CAGR, right? Explain how you do that calculation so that people, when you're hopefully meeting with someone from business and meeting with your users as you're laying this stuff out, that you can have that more detailed conversation, right? Like, I mean, this is the stuff, like a decade ago, we had fleets upon fleets of business analysts. They'd spend a year gathering all these requirements and they'd put them into this nice binder. I remember those binders so nice. They were great, right? And that's gone, right? So we don't have those business analysts and those binders with detailed requirements. So now wireframing is your time to get those detailed requirements or get some more of that requirements and information on what the heck a CAGR is, right? So define this stuff here, right? And then also understand what security is necessary on your data, right? If you're talking about like how you're going to share this, you now know if it's internal, external, whatnot. That should help give you information on like how secure you need to be defining this data, right? Like if we're talking about something I'm just passing back and forth with my buddy at work, Len, like, hey, like it doesn't matter, right? We have the same access. We're just sharing some stuff back and forth. No big deal, right? Like it's fine. But if I'm sharing sales information out to my sales org, well, I better understand what people are able to see, right? Salespeople are only able to typically, like they can only see their own sales information, right? You don't want Bob stealing Tom's accounts or causing problems like that, right? So you have to make sure you have the right security groups in place. And some organizations even go so far as to say, okay, well, salespeople on teams can see other people's sales numbers, but you can't see revenue. Oh, okay, well, hang on. Now I have a concept there that's very interesting. Like, how do I manage security where I have to allow one measure to have a dynamic access on and a dynamic access on another? And I still have to have that row level security on it. So you start to understand how complex this is going to be, right? So you started getting to what your row level security framework is going to be like, your object level security. Starting to lay that stuff out is really important, right? And this is where we start to get into like the data modeling, right? So we've kind of defined the sources, we've run through the things we need. Okay, let's start to talk through what kind of model are you going to have, right? Is this going to be just a dump of an Excel file and like that's it, right? Maybe that's it. Maybe it's one Excel file. It comes from a vendor, you want some analytics on it, it dumps once a month, and that's all it is. So it's just one big table. Okay, that's fine, right? That's a thing, right? Or maybe you're going to be doing some more traditional fact dimensional modeling stuff. And when we're wireframing, this is where I try really hard to be very brief in how I sketch these things out. Still important to know and understand, especially if you're having some weird Excel file that comes in out of nowhere. So it's important to lay this out inside here, but keep this part light. Again, I laid out like, okay, when you're working and building, it's 5% with the users, 15% on the reports, and then like 85 or 80% on the data or higher. When you're doing the wireframing, it's like 85% with the front end users experience. It's like 15% on the report layout, and then it's that 5% on that data side. So here are some just kind of elements that you can start to use for that. And again, we'll quickly do the sketch I would do for this. Again, this is this should be something that you work from, or that you can work from, right? So I'll grab my content, I'll copy it, I'll paste it in because I know I've got the stuff here. I know what these things are, right? And I'll start to like bring these things together to lay out what it is that I'm looking at, right? So I've got, often I've got, oh, what the heck was that? Often I've got my fact table. I might know that this is something that I'm going to pull from my data warehouse. I've got a number of dimensions that are going to support my needs. And I'm going to build this stuff out for my reports, right? But I only, actually we'll do it like this. Sorry. This guy, I'm actually going to need 2 fact tables. Oop. Right, because I have 2 different fact tables I'm going to be pulling from, so this goes into my conformed dimensions. If you're watching Guy in the Cube, Marco Russo, I believe, or mentioned like, hey, you need to have these conformed dimensions to do your joins between what you're working on. I'll bring these in, and so, okay, so I've got my 2 different facts. I've got my dimensions. I've got my conformed dimensions. So these guys will work together. These guys will only work together, right? These guys will only work together, right? I'm not going to be using any treat as, so I don't need any virtual columns in this case, so it's going to be relatively easy. Because if we're talking about the work that we're doing here with loads, I know I don't need any calc groups, and I know I don't need security on what we've been talking about, so I'm going to remove that there. I'd go through the exercise drawing this stuff together to make sure that, like, if I was doing a real wireframing, I'd talk through, like, what are my joins? Like, do I have inactive joins that I need to manage here? What are the pieces that I need to have? And then understand really that, and this is actually kind of funny. Well, actually, I'll put this guy up here. If you're working, and this is just a modeling thing, if you're working with the one big table, realistically, what you have, especially if you're building this into your model, is you're going to need to use conformed dimensions in order to get out into other facts. So it becomes something along the lines like it kind of takes the place of another fact that's out there. If you go in and look at the data model guide, I actually have some guiding and some instructions on how you can work and how you can manage this type of a thing. It does start to get complex, but it's something that's very common. Okay. All right, I do have some other simple slides that are down here, but you can kind of run through. You can see different modeling examples that are out there, how you build that stuff out. But again, this is the basics of how I set up and do wireframing. I find this very helpful, because if you take the time to lay out what it is your user pattern is going to be like, then you take the time to lay out your pages and define your measures, define what they're going to be. It makes the modeling part much easier. It makes, ensuring that you have all the right sources easier to work with and operate. And then it becomes simpler for you to lay out the effort and draw out the timeline and say, okay, hey, this report I can build out in the next week, or this report is something that, this ecosystem is something that's going to take me a PI to build out, or I need 3 resources, and, the data side is a mess. It's going to be garbage. Like the amount of transformations and to build this out is horrible. We're going to need more time, right? But this allows you to get to that point where you can lay out all that work and you can really start to put some t-shirt size swags on the effort here versus just randomly guessing, like, how long is this going to take, right? Well, thank you guys also very much for joining in. I hope that you guys found this useful and helpful. It's just me. I don't have a good way of watching a live stream when I'm talking about this, or the chat. I saw lots of chats going on, and I'm very hopeful that you found this useful. I'll go through the chats again, and I'll respond, and we can keep this conversation going. If you do want to keep this conversation going, though, please come on, join the Gilded Chat channel. I'll be happy to be, keep that conversation up over there. I'm really looking forward to, I hope this is useful for you. If you want to see different changes or any other things go on inside this template, like shoot me an email, right? Let me know. It's PowerPoint, right? Like we're not talking rocket scientists here. This is something that I hope is useful for you and for others in the organization that you work with in making sure that the Power BI projects you have are successful, right? Because at the end of the day, if we can't deliver on the promise of analytics to our businesses, what does it matter? Right. So thank you guys so very much. Plug, like, subscribe, leave a comment, send this around your office, share the Kratos BI website, all that good stuff. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate you hanging out with me and talking with me. It's my favorite thing in the world. Peace.